Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. I want to thank Mark for the introduction and the NCLCA for hosting our webinar today. I also want to thank you all for joining us for today's topic, where we'll be discussing behavioral science strategies to increase student help seeking. My name is Serena Bombley Crane, and I'm going to be kicking things off today. But before we get started, I just want to mention a few things. As Ross said, or as Mark said, this session will be recorded for you to access in the future. We'll be following up with a copy of it for you all over email. We also want to hear from you all today. If you do have any questions, as Mark said, please feel free to send it in to us using the chat function and we'll follow up with you. We're also going to be asking if you'll share some thoughts with us a few times during our time together using a tool named VBox. It is a website that allows us to poll and for you to interact with us. And so we ask that you keep your phone available so it's easy to pull out when we do reference it. And on your screen right now, you'll see some login instructions for how you can use VBox. You can use your phone to go to the website vbox.app, and then you'll enter the ID on the screen, and then you can answer some questions for us. And so that is actually how we are going to start our session today. We do want to review our goals for our time together, but before getting to that, it'd be great to hear from you all directly regarding what you're hoping to learn from us. And so on your screen right now, you'll see the question that we have for you to get us started. What do you want most want to get out of today's webinar? And so we'd love if you could chat in a few things. I see some answers coming in already, so help students feel motivated to ask for help. It's definitely on topic for us. And learning some great strategies, increasing student engagement, a better sense of data analytics as it relates to student success and how nudges are enhancing the student experience. Great. How to reduce student ghosting. I think we all would love to know the answer to that. Student success, learning effective messaging strategies. And how do identities impact help-seeking behaviors? These are all really great questions, and please feel free to keep sending them in. It's great to see that you are coming with a few questions in mind regarding help-seeking, and so that is going to be the topic for our discussion today. And thank you for sharing this all with us. So I am the Senior Manager of Partner Success at Persistence Plus, and I'm going to be facilitating today's session with my colleague, Dr. Ross O'Hara, who is our Director of Behavioral Science and Education. So let's start with an overview of what we will be covering today. We're going to begin with a brief introduction to who we are at Persistence Plus and our model. And we'll then jump into our lesson where Ross will identify the different types of help seekers and their characteristics. So great to see some questions come in about that. And we'll be wrapping up today's session with walking through how to leverage social norms to motivate student behavior. And we do have a few objectives for you today. By the end of our session, our goal is that you will understand how Persistence Plus and our model works. We also want you to leave today having an understanding of how you can identify the behaviors and mindsets of the four main academic help seekers and be able to apply social norms to changing students' help-seeking behaviors. And so to start with a little bit about us. At different points during their enrollment, students may encounter doubts or setbacks that can impact their progress. They may feel like everyone else has it figured out but them. Maybe they're afraid to ask for help, or they're feeling highly anxious or demotivated. And since 2012, we've been working to support students through our student success model that leverages behavioral nudging as an intervention. And so this idea that the right message at the right time can motivate students to make decisions that'll lead them to success. And so we are proactively connecting with students 2 to 3 times a week to develop mindsets to help them deal with academic setbacks and external obstacles, help them organize their time and their responsibilities, encourage them to engage with their peer network and campus resources for help, all while they're making progress towards their short and their long-term goals. We have a team of social psychologists, Ross is one of them, who crafts our interventions and develops them into nudges. And so these interventions are rooted in peer-reviewed research, and they're delivered to students as text messages on their phone, so they don't have to download an app or learn to use a new program to receive this valuable information from us. And the platform that we use to send these texts, it's scalable and intelligent because it's in facilitating these conversations with students by responding to them in real time. And so we can target the interventions that students receive and personalize them based off of the student characteristics that we know, but also how they're engaging with our nudges over real time. And we have an example of that to the right on your screen right now on the cell phone, where our platform is having a conversation with a student who has shared with us that they are a parent. And we know through research and through our own personal anecdotes that student parents have specific challenges with balancing familial responsibilities and work, and they can really struggle with guilt around that, as well as some of the other external factors that may impact how much time they spend with their family. And so the conversation you're seeing is our platform engaging in an exercise to combat that guilt by asking them to reflect on how their college degree will ultimately benefit their children. And since we learned that this really resonates with the student, our platform will continue to follow up with them throughout the academic year to learn more about their experience as a parent. And as we have supported tens of thousands of students this past decade, we've been able to evaluate our impact on their success through over 10 gold standard RCTs. And through these experiments, we found that persistence plus nudges do work to help students persist and ultimately complete their credentials. Some highlights we found are reduction in ethnic and racial equity gaps, a 6 percentage point increase in graduation rates among students most at risk, and a 7 percentage point increase in re-enrollment rates for community college students. And our papers have been published in several journals like AERA, and most recently the Journal for Post-Secondary Student Success. And we have refined our support over the years by working with a variety of partners. There's a sampling of them on your screen right now. We've worked with four-year colleges like Ohio University and Bennett College, college systems like CUNY, community colleges like Lorain County and Phoenix College, foundations and nonprofits, partners like Jobs for the Future and the Michigan Hispanic Collaborative. These partnerships have allowed us to expand our knowledge on how best to support students across multiple subpopulations, from high school students through college graduation, and also supporting their transition into the workforce. And so that was a brief overview of who we are at Persistence Plus and the work that we do. And I want to pass things along to Ross so that he can walk us through the next section of our session.
Thank you, Serena, and thank you everyone for being here. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Again, my name is Ross O'Hara. I'm the Director of Behavioral Science and Education Persistence Plus, and I'm really excited to share with you some ideas and advice around how we can think about the ways in which different college students approach help seeking when they are struggling with something. And we're going to focus on academic struggles today, since most of you are associated with different learning centers across the country, and how social norms can be a way to actually motivate some of those help seeking behaviors. And what you're going to be hearing today is a small part of another thing that Persistence Plus does to try to increase student success in higher education. Is we've developed a professional development series tailored for college faculty or college advisors or anyone else who is involved in student success, to teach them the types of behavioral science that goes into our platform and the interventions that we do through technology. So those types of strategies can also be used in the classroom and on campuses to further enhance their effects. And so what you're going to be listening to today hopefully will be helpful to you right now, something you can implement, starting on Monday or whenever, I know many of you are on campuses where the students aren't around very much right now, but whenever you're back in that role, be able to use those, but also give you a preview of what this professional development looks like that really, I think, touches on a lot of the things you said you wanted to learn. We won't get to all of those today, but certainly our fuller professional development series would do that. And so the first thing we're going to talk about today is some research and some of our own practical experience that has looked at really categorizing college students as into 4 types of help seekers when they're struggling with something. So these 4 types of help seekers we call the avid academic, the social scholar, the learning loner, and the insecure intellectual. And if you go to your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a tab that says Handouts 1. We have a handout for all of you that you can download right now if you'd like to look at that as we go along. We'll also include it in the follow-up email to you to make sure that you have that. And so what I want to talk a little bit about before we get into strategies for helping these different types of students is what distinguishes these 4 types of help seekers from one another. So first, I want to brainstorm with you all a little bit. So if you go back to Vivox, so get your phone out, and if it's logged you off of Vivox, the instructions are going to come right back up for how to get logged back in. And let me put up the next question for you, which is, when students are struggling academically, why don't they get help? What are all of the reasons that you have seen or you infer that when a student is struggling in class or not getting good grades, why is it that some students just don't ask for help? So we're going to see a nice little word cloud come up here. We see embarrassed is coming in strong. So a lot of emotion words: stigma, afraid, insecurity, anxiety, intimidation. Some practical things. I see time constraints. I see they don't know where to go. They're just too busy. Confusion makes them feel stupid, more with embarrassment, shame, weakness. Stigma, scared are getting big in our word cloud. Yeah, I think, when I talk to people about this, we kind of end up with generally these 2 large buckets of reasons why people don't seek help. Some are the practical reasons, like being too busy or not understanding what resources are there. And those are very important. We're not going to talk about those as much today. We're going to talk more about these emotions like embarrassment, scared, shame, stigma, which all come under this umbrella of what we call help-seeking threat. So what we're talking about with a lot of these students is a different degree of help-seeking threat, or different ways in which they experience help-seeking threat when they're struggling academically. And so we're always asking students on our platform about help-seeking and how they're responding to it. And we hear this all the time. Some of these same words that you all came up with are present in these responses from students on our platform about feeling nervous, anxious, overwhelmed, upset, crying, feeling dumb, feeling belittled. These are all instances of this help-seeking threat. And one of the ways in which these 4 types of help seekers differentiate from one another that I'll show you in a minute. The other big thing I like to talk about with these different types of help seekers is not only how they perceive help, but whom or what they perceive as a source of help. So I'm going to go throw up the next question on Vivox. It's another brainstorming question. And that is, when students are struggling academically, where could they turn for help? I want you to come up with all the answers you can for a student is struggling in whatever class, like how could they get help? So I'll start putting up this word cloud. We see professor and tutoring, not surprising, tutoring and professor pretty high on the list. I see a lot of synonyms for that. Teacher, learning centers. I also see friends and peers coming up. Academic resources, learning support, the textbook. I love seeing family. That is often one, we're going to talk a little bit about that. That is often one that I do these workshops and nobody says family. I see YouTube, which of course we know a lot of students today, especially the younger students, very much like YouTube, TikTok, for finding help with things, maybe not necessarily math skills on TikTok, but a lot of things. Great. Well, I think you guys have really done a great job covering sort of the gamut of what we think of as formal versus informal types of help seeking. And so, thinking about different types of help sources on campus, typically our formal help sources are all of the many resources that you as a college provide, the professors, the learning centers, the advisors, all the different offices, counseling and wellness support. And that tends to be what a lot of colleges focus on as far as getting students to seek help. How do we get them in these doors that we have built for them? But we also need to acknowledge the importance of informal help sources, classmates, friends, siblings, parents, and I put here on stuff like Google, YouTube, TikTok. And so one thing that's important to think about with formal versus informal help is that these categories are not set in stone. If a student is struggling in class and they come to ask you for study tips and skills, you're definitely a formal help source. If they come to ask you about their relationship problems, you're suddenly an informal help source, but you might still be able to help them. And sometimes, things like internet resources like YouTube, Khan Academy, sometimes we make those the formal help sources. So these categories are not set in stone. They're mushy, but I think these tend to be a pretty good distinction when thinking about where can we send different students for help. So that brings me back around to talking about these 4 types of help seekers, because I think those 2 ideas are really important for understanding what we're talking about here. So the avid academic is, generally speaking, the student we're not worried about, and the student we kind of want all of our students to be. They really want to learn the material for the sake of learning and growth, and so they're not threatened by help seeking. They ask for help easily. They have a growth mindset and believe that they can learn and grow and improve. And they tend to go right to the source. Like they want to go to the professor's office hours, to a tutor, to an advisor. They really kind of want the authority on a subject to come and help them. And that's kind of the ideal student we often put in our minds of like what we want them to do. But another really important type of help seeker is the social scholar, who is very similar to the avid academic in their goals and their outlook. They just tend to be a little intimidated by authority figures or those formal help-seeking sources. So they tend to rely on classmates, friends, family for help more so than official sources. And in many cases, this can be fine. They can do very well with this until they run into a situation where they really have to go to a formal help source, or they're just not going to be able to succeed. And then they are going to need some type of motivation intervention. The next 2 types of help seekers are the ones who we know are the most challenged when it comes to succeeding academically, and the research bears this out. The third one we call the learning loner. So they're often a little confused about what their goals are in a class, why they're here, what they want to get out of it. And help seeking is very threatening to them. They don't want to do it, and therefore they don't do it. And so any student you've ever had where they're struggling, but they're just not telling anyone, and maybe they drop out of college and they just never really did anything to get help, that's your learning loner. The last type of student is very interesting because they are also greatly threatened by help seeking, but they've kind of, through years of being in the educational system, developed a way to deal with that and kind of keep going along, even though ultimately the research shows us they tend to struggle in the end, is the insecure intellectual. So their main goal is often to get a good grade for the sake of the reward, for the idea that getting A's is what you're supposed to do. And they want to look smart, but they don't necessarily care so much about deeply learning the material. And so they engage in what is known as executive help seeking. So they're the student who comes to you and says, can't you just tell me the answer? Can't you just do this for me? Can't you just fill it out for me? Like they're asking for help, but they're not really asking for help. They're asking for, just expedient kind of, let's get this done so I can move on to the next thing. And that's because they are threatened by help. They don't really want to kind of show off that they're not understanding what's going on, but they want to make sure they get a good grade or they keep up this image of themselves as a good student. And so this is the strategy they employ. But ultimately, there will come a point where this strategy doesn't work so well for them anymore. And so when we're building our interventions in Persistence Plus to try to encourage help seeking, or I'm working with college learning centers or faculty or advisors to think about different initiatives we can do to encourage help seeking, these 4 types of help seekers are really kind of our background, our foundation of like trying to make sure we're coming up with things that are tailored to different types of experiences, and not necessarily trying to say, oh, one of these, there are bad types of help seekers and good types of help seekers, but really just trying to help students in whichever ways they perceive help. Now, before I move into one of these strategies that we often use, I want to ask a VVox poll question. I'm curious to know, let me get this loaded up. When you were an undergraduate, which type of help seeker were you? And be honest. And maybe it changed as college went on. You know, certainly these types of things are not, again, something else, not set in stone. But what type of help seeker were you most like? I will say I was definitely the social scholar. I was all about building that study group, getting together with friends, you know, late night study parties, not as comfortable going to professors or learning centers and places like that. Let's see what's coming up here. All right, we have a good mix. Sometimes I did this poll once with a group of faculty, and every single person said they were the avid academic, which probably was pretty much true given the work they got into. But yeah, so for many of you, it seems like hopefully you can relate to these different types of students, and your experience is going to allow you to sort of connect with them in a different way than, you know, since many of us who end up working in and around higher education tend to be this avid academic type. Cool. I'm going to close that poll. Let's back to our presentation. So the strategy we want to talk about today, as far as how do we help different types of help seekers, is really social norms. So social norm theory is based on the general principle that as human beings, we tend to follow other people a lot. When we're in a confusing, ambiguous, unknown situation, our first human instinct is often to, well, let's look at what everyone else is doing, and I'm just going to do that. To give you an illustration of this, I'm just going to show you a video for a few minutes of people who are in a weird situation deciding, hey, I'm just going to go with the norm here. And let's hope this plays.
Will they join the line even though they have no idea what they'd be waiting for? They're in. We've got them. And now that these...
No, don't. Sorry, give me 1 second here.
Who joined the line? The floodgates are open. People just can't resist joining in. What is it? Looks like it could be something fun. Is it free? Yeah, free. And the longer the line got, the more others wanted to join. Remember, these people have no idea what they're waiting for. What's this like? An event or something? All it took was one person. Now we've got a crowd of random strangers.
This phenomenon is known as informational social influence, and it occurs when you rely on others to determine your course of action. You're much more likely to use social influence when the situation is ambiguous, such as in a crisis, or when you're uncertain about what to do.
And as you can see, even without a clear reason for waiting, our line grew and grew and grew. Time to get this show on the road. Where to exactly? Now that the line is moving, we wanted to see if people would follow along even though they had no idea where they were going. We're going to test the science of follow the leader with 3 unexpected obstacles. First, a dizzying maze.
Where are we going?
And even though the path makes no sense, no one is getting out of the line. Do you think these people will realize they're going nowhere fast? Looks like they're in it for good. Now for the next step, we put tape on the ground to see if people will jump over it just because they saw someone else do it. Think they will? Wow, a spinning jump. 3 points for style. Finally, we set up a hopscotch game and had our ringer do it. Will other people follow suit? Would you? All of these adults are playing this kids game because their brains want to follow the leader. So getting each of them to take a lay from an Elvis impersonator is a no-brainer. Now, for the final part of our Pied Piper experiment, do you think we can get them to dance in a conga line? By now, you probably know the answer. Absolutely yes. Remember, all this started just one man waiting in line for nothing. We're setting up.
So that's a very fun video, and obviously they set up a very silly situation for people, who are in Las Vegas and maybe kind of really open to just seeing what sort of fun, odd experiences they can get into. But it also speaks to this idea of social norms and how we like to follow along with what other people are doing. And so I want to show you a study that kind of also speaks to the power of social norms, and especially when they are in the environment around us. So this was a study that was done in a parking garage at a hospital, where what the researchers did was they put advertising flyers under people's windshield wipers. And they wanted to see, when people came to their car, would they take that flyer off the car and either, do any, like throw it in the recycling or put it in their pocket or take it with them or whatever, or would they crumple it up and just toss it away? And they wanted to see how social norms in this situation would influence what their behavior was. So one was they created a social norm within the environment by having the parking garage either be like perfectly spotlessly clean or be filled with litter. So there was other flyers crumpled and thrown about the garage. They also created a social norm that people observed. So they had someone who was a part of the study would walk by just as someone got to their car. They'd come up to the car next to them, grab the flyer, and either take it and like go put it in the recycling bin, or they'd crumple it up and throw it on the ground. So there's two different types of norms going on here. A norm that people are inferring from the environment around them, and a norm they directly get to observe somebody engage in, kind of like those people in the line in Las Vegas. And what they found was the environmental norm was incredibly powerful. So in a garage where people saw a bunch of litter about, they were more likely to just litter themselves. And this got even worse if they watched another person litter. But when the environment was nice and clean, they were more likely to do something else with the flyer rather than throw it on the ground. And their behavior got even better if they were in a clean garage and then they saw someone litter. Because now that person is not the norm. They're not like, oh, everyone around here just litters. Now they're the jerk who's messing up this beautiful parking garage with their litter. And the people's behavior got even more pro-environmental. And so the environments we construct can be very influential. And one idea, one example that comes to mind, one of our college partners we work with will have different opportunities for tutors, and individuals from the Learning Center will be positioned in the buildings with the classrooms, like right outside the classrooms, and be doing tutoring centers, on the couches or the tables there. And not only does this make the idea of going to tutoring much more convenient, people don't need to know where it is or find another building because it's right there. It also takes that tutoring and makes it out in the open, observable. Now you're watching a social norm of people going to a tutor and asking for help with class, instead of it being in another building, in an office, behind a door, and people don't really know, students don't really know what that experience is like. But in a lot of cases, with the people we work with and in the work we do, since as Serena told you, our platform exists over text messaging, we don't always have the opportunities to change the environmental norms. What we often have the ability to do is change norms that we communicate to students, whether we're doing it through text messaging like Persistence Plus, through emails, through flyers and advertising. We can try to imbue a new norm into people. And so to give you an example of this, this was a study that was done before the pandemic, when, if you recall, whenever you went to a hotel room, there was usually a placard in the bathroom that asked you to reuse your towels. And it would say something about this will save water, this will conserve energy, this will be better for the environment. It would have a picture of a dolphin or something. It was all about like, let's band together to save the environment by reusing our towels. So quick poll question I like to ask people before I show them the results of this study. Do you, when you go to a hotel for multiple nights, actually reuse your bath towels? Or are you getting new bath towels every single day? I will say I'm definitely a bath towel reuser, except I don't know if you've ever been someplace like like Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Those towels never get dry. It's too humid down there. Okay, yeah. So we got a majority of people saying always, or like sometimes, like I said, sometimes you really need a new towel. Some people are never. The first time I ever asked this question was in a live audience, and somebody just shouted out like, no, like that's the reason I go to the hotel is for the nice, clean, fluffy towel every day. All right, cool. So, well, I'm going to show you what they found in the study where they actually tracked this behavior in a hotel. Back to my PowerPoint. So in the control condition where there was a placard in the room that said, do this to help save the environment, reuse your towels, they found 37% of people actually reuse their towels. So what they really wanted to study here was social norms. Would it be more effective, instead of trying to appeal to people's better angels to save the environment, just tell them other people reuse their towels, so you should too? And you might guess by now that the answer is yes. That was more effective than the pro-environmental message. So when the placard said that the majority of people who stayed at this hotel reused their towels, rates went up to 44%. When the placard said other people who have stayed in this room reuse their towels, that was the most effective norm they found in their study. It raised towel reuse to 49%. So this study tells us a couple of things. One, social norms, even communicated to people on something that you're never going to get to observe, can be very influential. And two, social norms can be a little quirky. The researchers admitted they were very surprised by this result because we don't identify with other people who have stayed in the same hotel room as us. Most of the time, we don't want to think about who was just in the hotel room the night before us reusing the towels. But that actually was the biggest sway on people's behavior. And so these social norms, whether we can change the environment or whether we can communicate social norms to students about help seeking, about coming to learning centers, could be very influential. So I want to turn you back to Vivox one last time for one more brainstorming. It's just, I'd love to hear from you. What help-seeking behaviors would you like to see become more normative among students? I'm sure going to the Learning Center is going to be a big one here, but what types of help-seeking behaviors do you think should be more normative among students? What do you want to see them do more? Tutoring, 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 tutoring. Of course, I know that is your role. I see office hours just popped up big, talking to profs. Yeah, asking for help early, like at, kind of, if students could do their own kind of early alert on themselves, that would be great. I see going to the textbook. Yeah, so, there are students who will just ask for help and they've never even bothered trying a practice problem or using a textbook. I see seeking out faculty. Yeah, and there are a lot of different behaviors, a lot of different help seeking that we can try to use social norms for. And so I'm going to show you a couple of studies now in a row that kind of illustrate some of the instances in which social norms can be most effective. Because one of the things I learned years ago when I started teaching this stuff to people is I talk about social norms, people get excited about using them, which is great, and then they would try to turn every single message, every single intervention into social norms. But there are situations where social norms work better than others, and that's why I want to try to illustrate for you in the next couple of slides. So as I've kind of already mentioned, one of the things social norms are great for is resolving ambiguity. Whenever behavior is ambiguous, unknown, and we know this is the case for so many of our students who come to college and they don't know all the norms, they don't know, they call it the rules of the game. Norms can be really influential. So this was a study that was done at Arizona State where they wanted more students to renew FAFSA by the priority deadline. And they had done some pre-research and found that a lot of students who received financial aid actually believed that they were in the minority. They thought most students going to college were like paying it all themselves. And so they sent these reminder emails over the course of 8 weeks. But for some of the students, it included this line, fact, over 80% of Arizona State students receive financial aid, just to try to change that norm. And so the study included over 63,000 students, and they also did a variation where they sent these reminder emails either to the students themselves or to their parents or to both of them. And they found this was very effective. So in the control group, only 29% of students filed by the priority deadline. But when the emails included these facts saying this is the norm, is doing the FAFSA and getting financial aid, you see rates increased anywhere from 40 to 50%, with the most effective being norming it for the parents and the students. Another place norms really help is just trying to endorse help seeking. There are a lot of things that we might not feel necessarily any sort of real help seeking threat toward, but I think we all know that feeling of like, I don't want to be the only person there. I don't want to be the only one to do it. And sometimes a norm can just kind of create that little bit of endorsement that's all we need or all a student needs to engage in a behavior. And so this came from a big project we did several years ago called Nudges to the Finish Line. It was funded by the Institute for Education Sciences, and the goal was to promote help seeking and persistence and ultimately graduation for students in their last year or so of college. Since in many instances, those students feel some of those supports being taken away from them, we want to kind of add in some more support to make sure they finished and didn't end up a few credits short with a bunch of debt. And so one focus in this study based on our research was trying to get students to go to tutoring centers because we heard a lot of students have done okay in college to this point. They're in their last year. Now they've hit a course where all of a sudden they're like, oh gosh, this is so hard. And they're not used to asking for help. They've never been to the learning center. And so we're trying to create this new norm of like, hey, even though you're a senior in your last year, like you can still do this. And so we sent nudges like the ones you see on the right here, just trying to say that many students use tutoring to enhance their learning and giving them some detailed information about where they could go. And what we found at one of our partner colleges in this project, LaGuardia Community College in New York, they had where students had to scan their ID to go in and out of tutoring. So they had specifically how many minutes students spent in tutoring. You see that there was an over 5 times increase in the use of tutoring over the course of a semester. So mostly this was a lot of students who never went to tutoring now went to a tutoring session and got some help. And going back to the brainstorming you all came up with for why students don't seek help, there was a lot to do with negative affect, stigma, shame. Social norms can be a big help with that. So this is a nudge on the left that we send to our college partners, where we're trying to destigmatize the use of the food pantry, along with any other resources or supports colleges provide for alleviating poverty. And so back in 2018, with one of our good partners, Lorain County Community College, we sent this nudge trying to normalize going to their Commodore cupboard, their food pantry. And we tracked use of the food pantry for the next month and found that there was a 51% increase in seeing new families coming to the food pantry compared to the month before. So norms seem to be especially powerful with anything that has some sort of stigma or shame attached to it. The last study I want to show you is, the nudges we've shown you from Persistence Plus, the studies, the emails, all of that have been very student targeted, trying to change students' norms around help seeking. But norms are not just for students. Changing norms on a college campus can be for everybody. So I wanted to show you one more study in which researchers tried to change the faculty's norms as it related to referring students to a learning center. And so what they did was, over the course of a semester at a community college, the researchers sent 8 emails to faculty. It was only to faculty, that included, here are the steps if you want to refer a student to tutoring for your class. And they tried to norm it by providing these success stories of, like, here's a professor who saw the student struggling, referred them to tutoring, they ended up getting an A in the class, and now they're, a major in it, things like that. And so step 1, the faculty across the board in the study reported, increased awareness of tutoring resources and how to refer students to that. But for those faculty who received the norm and really started to change their beliefs around faculty engaging in this behavior, there was over 3 times increase in the rate of faculty who are actually referring their students to tutoring. And so it's important when we're thinking about changing social norms around different behaviors, different ways of looking at help seeking. It's not all about just changing it in the minds of the students. We can also change it in the minds of everyone on campus in different ways. And so as we wrap up, I see questions have been coming in on my GoToWebinar panel. It's a little hard to see them with everything up, but we're going to get to some of those questions in a minute. But just wanted to leave you kind of wrapping up this idea of using social norms to encourage help seeking. Here is a table on the bottom of your screen that kind of talk about as a way to sort of think and categorize 3 different types of situations: resolving ambiguity, endorsing behavior, and reducing stigma, where social norms can have their biggest impact. And then you could brainstorm ways to do that through both how could students directly observe, and then absorb a new social norm around help seeking coming to a learning center. How could the environment sort of infer that behavior for them, or imply that behavior for them so they infer it? Or ways in which you can directly communicate those norms. And certainly a lot of the ideas you could come up with using this framework often are doing multiple things. Like they might both resolve an ambiguity and reduce a stigma or something like that. But this is just a way that you could, a template you could use to start to brainstorm how to use social norms to try to get more people to learning centers. And then this just includes some other tips around making sure any behavior you ever want to norm is very specific. Saying, I want to norm students asking for help is a little cloudy, but I want to norm students making an appointment to the learning center. It's a very concrete behavior. I always tell people you don't have to have statistics in your norms. A lot of the norms we showed you through Persistence Plus just said a lot of students do this. Sometimes people get really fixated on, like, well, I'll have to do a survey and find out the number of students who do it so we can say like the exact percentage. If you have that knowledge, great, use it. But it's not necessary. Like every norm has to be tied to a very specific statistic. And I often advise people to really focus on norming solutions, not necessarily challenges. Often we have sort of a knee-jerk reaction with students who maybe are struggling to say, it's okay. A lot of students struggle early in this class. A lot of students have trouble with math or English. And that's great because that can make them feel better, and feeling better is going to be a good first step toward getting help. But don't leave it there. Make sure, and then those students who are very normal in their struggles, it's also very normal for them to go to the learning center and get help. And then, as I kind of talked about a little bit about already, think about ways the environment can norm the behavior, not just focusing on your communications, though those are very important too. And how can faculty and staff help norm the behavior? It doesn't have to all be directly targeted at students themselves. So we're at a quarter till the hour, so we have plenty of time for questions. Do want to just quickly thank everyone for being here. Hope you all have learned something. A reminder again, there will be a recording sent to you, the slides, and the handout, or you can download the handout directly from the GoToWebinar control panel right now. And with that, Serena, do you want to help get us going on answering some of these questions?
Sure. So Ross, I thought this would be a great question to start with. So Mary had shared this question early in our presentation, but She said, you keep saying our platform. Does this refer to AI or real people? So Ross, do you mind taking that question?
Sure. So yes, the Persistence Plus platform is an AI-based automated system that proactively reaches out to students a couple of times a week to provide different types of support, motivation, interventions, information, kind of based on where they are in their academic journey, what part of the semester it is, how they've responded in the past to nudges to indicate what they're struggling with. And so this is an automated communication system. They can answer questions and go back and forth with the system. Though it all has a human backdrop, wonderful humans like Serena who are always observing the system and making sure that it is functioning as it is intended to, and are able to jump in, if a student asks a question or says something that our system is not sure the meaning of, there's Serena to make sure that that gets answered correctly or referred to the right resource.
Great. And we have another question that came in from Michelle. Ross, she'd asked if you could talk more about norming for faculty. Not enough students are hearing about tutoring from their instructors. How can we shape instructor behaviors?
Great question. So I think, I just got done with a professional development series that was for the faculty, and it I'd say, it went really well. I think they were really excited because I think they themselves, it seemed, kind of suffer the same fate a little bit in that they are sometimes like subject to the same like social norms of like, oh, I don't know if other faculty are doing this. I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So obviously in that study I showed you, they were able to communicate this through emails and just trying to show like other faculty are talking about the tutoring center. It is in the syllabus. And so, perhaps there can be some sort of professional development, doesn't have to be from us necessarily, or something you put on just to try to get everyone in the room talking about referring to the tutoring center or making sure those resources are available, because they just have to see like, okay, all of the faculty are going to do this. So much, I've been a faculty member and I know how so much of like building a syllabus and a course, often has this very like individual feel to it. It's like something you do privately. So the more public you can make those things and showing what everyone else is doing, what I just saw at the community college I was working with all spring was like people got really excited to see like, oh, you are doing that? Like I'm going to start doing that too. And then it's, it starts to spread from there.
Okay. So see a question from Rochelle who said, many of my colleagues are skeptical of social science interventions or resistant to anything that looks like social control. How do you respond to these concerns?
Yeah, I think, if you look at the history of what we now call behavioral science or nudging, like this has come up from day one. And, there are a couple of kind of guiding principles. One is that, always keeping in mind, like in some ways, the lack of behavioral science, the lack of an intervention is a choice and is something that's going on. So I know, for example, there have been studies that have been done where instead of having people who work for an employer opt in to a retirement plan, saying everyone's automatically enrolled in the retirement plan, and if you don't want it, you have to opt out. And that's actually it's still a little bit under contention, but in the Secure 2.0 Act that the government passed late last year, that was actually part of it, was saying all employees where there is a retirement plan have to be automatically enrolled. And it's not that one of those is social control or the other one isn't. It's just a different way of structuring the retirement plan. People think opting in is somehow freer than opting out when really they're the same thing. So that's one of the main principles, is trying to say, make all behavior as freely accessible as possible, but just framing it in different ways. And then second is, really, I think, thinking strongly and deeply about the goals of the people you want to help. Certainly, behavioral science and nudging can take on a little bit of a paternalistic feel. But if you're really genuine about like what are students' goals, and how can we help the students achieve their own goals, and saying like, well, this is what we want for them, you're going to have much, I think, more earnest and more effective interventions. And that's kind of been our guiding principle for the last decade, is saying, we want to understand what the students' goals are and then send them nudges that are going to help them with their goals and achievements, rather than trying to say like, oh, we would never come in and be like trying to nudge them to be like, you should go into this major, you should go for this degree or do this thing. Like, tell us what you want to do, and then we'll send you the interventions we think will get you there.
So there is a question from Aaron. He said, in the beginning of the presentation, you had a stat on reducing equity gaps, I believe an 89% change. Can you talk about that data and what work you've done around addressing equity gaps?
Sure. So a lot of the behavioral science that we have built into Persistence Plus, and it's a lot of the stuff I talk about in the professional development series, is really looking at what types of programs, interventions, nudges, whatever, that have been rigorously tested, have been peer-reviewed, published, and have shown disproportionate impact for students of color, for students from low-income backgrounds, for first-generation students. And that's kind of the core of what we do at Persistence Plus. And so those are the types of interventions we are sending out, customized for those different demographics of students or the different colleges we work with. We've worked with HBCUs and minority serving institutions. And then when we're using those, we are always coming back to our data analytics and trying to break down everything by different types of demographics to look at, are there different rates of student engagement? Are there different rates of student response? And then, ultimately, Persistence Plus is often looking at persistence. It's right there in the name. Persistence, graduation rates, and are those being differentially impacted for different demographics of students who are receiving this customized content based on what we see in the literature. And so, with many partners, we've been able to look at how we are starting to shrink some of those equity gaps that exist.
Right. So I think this is a great question. This is from Christina, who said, are you seeing the same level of impact from the platform since the pandemic? We've seen a significant decrease in changes in student help-seeking behavior, as well as faculty engagement with our center compared to pre-pandemic behaviors. And I think we know through our platform just how important maintaining that level of connection was for students at the peak of the pandemic, right at the beginning, when campuses were sort of struggling to figure out how best to remain connected to students that were now disconnected from campus. But Ross, what would you say we're seeing right now, or even hearing from some of our partners about, the level of engagement? I would say on our platform, we are still seeing consistent levels of engagement. But Ross, just curious if you had anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I think as far as the use of our platform, in the initial throes of the pandemic, engagement ballooned, since now in many cases, students were reporting back to us they felt like we were kind of their best connection to the campus that they were no longer allowed to visit. But as this has gone on, I think Persistence Plus, is just another type of, virtual support really to students, fits in well to their whole educational space, as far as, more of them are taking virtual classes, they're just doing more stuff online. Still, even as we've returned to campus, we know that kind of virtual space and wanting online options for everything is still a big student demand. And though, one of the things that some of our partners have come to us with is saying like, we're still seeing engagement in online courses. We're still seeing engagement with virtual tutoring. Can you help us get more engagement in the physical spaces on campus? And so that's, I would say, norms is again one strategy we've tried among others to try to get students, back to similar place to where they were in 2019, early 2020, where, coming to campus and being a part of like the vibrant campus life that you all create is something that they're attracted to and are gaining the benefits from.
So I think we may have time for one more question, but I did want to read this from Melissa, who said, I don't know if it helps, but personal experience suggests to me that perhaps the professors may not be recommending tutoring to their students because of their own personal experience with professional development. It's typically a mandatory attendance event, and many times the topics isn't as interesting as one would hope. So perhaps instructors themselves feel like they are paid to learn or work on something that they're bored with. Why would you expect a student to choose to go to tutoring? We've been hosting events on campus and in our learning center this past semester to encourage a semi-non-structured environment for students, faculty, and staff to come and see what occurs here and make it less intimidating and more personable. So I thought that was a really great comment, Melissa. And I could definitely agree with what you said. At times, having the opportunity for PD can be great, but at times, if it's a topic that may not be as interesting or relevant, it can be sort of hard to translate that experience into how you then communicate some resources or opportunities for students to engage on campus, for sure.
And I was just going to add, that's one thing for several years now doing professional development of behavioral science strategies for student success. I've noticed whenever I've done this with many different colleges, but I've usually only ever done it for like one component of the college, like just the faculty or just the advising team or, just the learning center. And I've always kind of wanted to see more of that, like broadening to bring people from all different areas of the campus in at the same time, because not only is that going to help these strategies proliferate and be part of the student experience everywhere, but in those small instances and when I've been able to be a part of those types of conversations where there's representation from across campus, just the amount of learning that happens between just knowing how all of the different parts of your university or college work are so important, and really I think start to change some of the norms around what everyone does and how students experience it. So I'm always kind of pushing for that kind of cross-functionality.
Well, we do want to be cognizant of time, and so thank you all for your questions and for tuning in today. If we didn't get to answer your question, we will try to follow up with you personally. As we mentioned, that you will receive a copy of this recording and a follow-up email. And so thank you everyone for joining. We hope you have a great rest of the day and a great weekend. And please feel free to reach out to us if you do have any questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, I want to also for coming on behalf of NCLCA. Thanks for coming out to the vendor webinar. It's great to have the vendors come on and help support the organization. So again, thank you to Ross and Serena for your wonderful presentation. I myself learned a lot as well. So thank you all.
Thank you.